Not content with its genocide in Gaza, Israel has expanded a war of annihilation to Lebanon. At least 365 people have reportedly been killed in Lebanon and 1,256 injured, of course, by Israeli attacks. Dozens of women and children were reported to be amongst those butchered. This has been described as one of the bloodiest days in the history of Lebanon. Let's humanize this slaughter for a moment. One of those killed, little Yasmina, just 7 years old, in South Lebanon. Once again, the world is being told, in no uncertain terms, that Arab life is cheap, to the point of being virtually worthless. Now, the way Israeli leaders communicate to the English-speaking world and to their own people is very different. This is a really important point. Let me illustrate it. This is the Israeli Minister of Education. Have a listen to this.
אז אני אומר את זה לצרפתים ולאחרים, מה שנקרא, ממדינות העולם שטוענות את זה. אין שום הבדל בין חיזבאללה ללבנון. לבנון תושמד לאור כמו שהדברים מתקדמים. ואני אומר את זה אפילו עכשיו בצורה מאוד בוטה. אנחנו באירוע שבו לבנון הולכת לקראת השמדה. לא תהיה אותה לבנון כמו שהם מכירים. אני לא הולך להתעסק בצייד קטיושות של חיזבאללה. את המחיר לתוקפנות מאדמת לבנון תשלם מדינת לבנון.
סליחה, השר קיש, אתה השתמשת במילה, ביקשת שאני לא אקטע אותך. תושמד. השמדה יש לה במינוח העברי, אתה יודע, לשר הביטחון אמר תחזור לימי האבן.
אתה יודע מה? אני מתקן את דבריי. לא תושמד. לבנון כמו שאנחנו מכירים אותה לא תהיה קיימת. לבנון תשלם את המחיר הכבד בגלל חיזבאללה. ואני מתקן את דבריי, לא תושמד, אבל אני מדייק.
There's no difference between Hezbollah and Lebanon. Lebanon will be annihilated. It will cease to exist. A straightforward call, once again, for genocide. This genocidal intent needs to be taken seriously. After all, when Israeli leaders spoke about destroying Gaza and imposing collective punishment on its people, they meant what they said, stuck to their word, and acted on it. He then claims to be correcting himself, who has not accidentally called for the annihilation of another country, that he was without claims to wanting to annihilate entire countries, cast the first stone, as the proverb goes. He then claims to be correcting himself and declares the price of aggression from Lebanon's territory will be paid by the state of Lebanon, which in practice, of course, will mean its people. So bear that in mind when Netanyahu says the following.
I have a message for the people of Lebanon. Israel's war is not with you. It's with Hezbollah. For too long, Hezbollah has been using you as human shields. It placed rockets in your living rooms and missiles in your garage. Those rockets and missiles are aimed directly at our cities, directly at our citizens. To defend our people against Hezbollah strikes, we must take out those weapons. Now, starting this morning, the IDF has warned you to get out of harm's way. I urge you, take this warning seriously. Don't let Hezbollah endanger your lives and the lives of your loved ones. Don't let Hezbollah endanger Lebanon. Please, get out of harm's way now. Once our operation is finished, you can come back safely to your homes.
I have a message for the people of Lebanon. Israel's war is not with you, it's with Hezbollah. He then declares Hezbollah has been using the people of Lebanon as human shields, demanding they get out of harm's way and then they can return safely to their homes. Well, bollocks. We've heard this time and time again in the history of Israel. They drive people, the state, from their homes, and those people never return. That's exactly what's happening to Gaza. It previously happened to the people of Gaza, the vast majority of whom are the families of those forced to flee their homes in the Nakba, in what is now the official borders of Israel in 1948. No, he says all of this in English, with English subtitles, rather than Arabic. Why? Because this is not aimed at the Lebanese people. It's aimed at a Western audience to try and sow confusion and division amongst the Western public, increasingly repulsed by Israel's mass violence. Now, last November, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, who, like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, has issued a request for arrest warrants against them both. He made this promise.
חיזבאללה גורר את לבנון למלחמה שעלולה לקרות. והוא עושה טעויות. אם הוא יעשה טעויות מהסוג הזה כאן, מי שישלם את המחיר זה קודם כל אזרחי לבנון. מה שאנחנו עושים בעזה אנחנו יודעים לעשות בביירות.
He said, what we are doing in Gaza, we know how to do to Beirut, or in Beirut. He then declared who will pay the price. First of all, the citizens of Lebanon. None of this is subtle. As even the BBC have noted, over 80% of the cross-border attacks between Israel and Lebanon since last October have been perpetrated by Israel. And it is Israel with a hideous history of mass slaughter in Lebanon. When they invaded in 1982, their mass butchery of civilians was so hideous that even the US Republican President Ronald Reagan was repulsed, ringing up the Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, himself the former leader of the Zionist terrorist organization, the Irgun, which slaughtered Palestinians and committed atrocities such as the King David Hotel bombing in 1946. In that phone call, Reagan protested about what he called a Holocaust being perpetrated by Israel. Now, Israel's allies also perpetrated the mass slaughter of Sabra and Shatia, a refugee camp in Lebanon, in which Palestinian and Lebanese civilians were subjected to the most hideous slaughter. And Israel's Minister of Defense, Ariel Sharon, at the time, was found responsible for this atrocity by an Israeli commission that did not stop him later becoming Israeli Prime Minister. In the 2006 invasion, Israel also developed the Dahir Doctrine, which involved attacking civilian infrastructure and civilian targets in order to try and make the civilian population turn against Hezbollah, using violence against civilians for political ends. We have a word for that in the English dictionary. It's called terrorism. Indeed, other Israeli politicians speaking to Israeli audiences are making their intentions clear, like Amichai Chikli, the Israeli Minister for Diaspora Affairs. Today he tweeted, in Hebrew, Lebanon, even though it has a flag and even though it has political institutions, does not meet the definition of a country. He's declared that the Lebanese government is not a sovereign entity and further declared that neither Syria or Iraq qualify for the definition of state either. He's demanded a redrawing of the border with Lebanon, which means depopulation and annexing southern Lebanon, justified as creating a security buffer. So when you see these absurd CGI graphic videos offered up by the Israeli army as evidence that buildings across southern Lebanon contain missiles with schools and hospitals shown as military bases, you should be horrified. This is what they did in Gaza to justify their mass destruction of civilian infrastructure, the only evidence offered up being exactly these sorts of absurd graphics. Indeed, the foreign minister of Israel, Israel Katz, tweeted a truly bizarre CGI picture of Hezbollah's leader sitting in the home of a woman crying. He tweeted, Nasrallah is deploying Hezbollah's missiles in the homes of Lebanese citizens using the civilian population as human shields. Any civilian living near Hezbollah weapons should leave their home immediately for their own safety. Well, again, this is simply justifying the mass forced displacement of civilians. We have a word for that, a term for that, ethnic cleansing, and the mass slaughter of civilians on the grounds that every Lebanese civilian killed is in fact a human shield whose death can be blamed on the enemy. How does a civilian even know they were hidden? They were near such weapons if they were hidden. Let's be clear about what's happening here. Israel has unleashed a genocidal frenzy against Gaza. It has achieved mass destruction and death, no question about that. But it has brought very few of its hostages alive through military means, and it has failed to defeat Hamas by military means. It will never do that. That in basis is the base is the term. Sorry, that itself is the basis of the conflict in turn with Hezbollah. But Israel's only response is mass slaughter. And now that threatens to massively expand the bloodbath on a regional level. Israel is already unleashing mass death, as we see against Lebanon. All of this is being licensed and indeed armed by the United States, which is allowing Israel to unleash deadly mayhem on a mass scale. Well, the consequences are going to be grave, not least for the West, which keeps telling the world, as I say, that Arab life is cheap to the point of being meaningless. The world has listened, and the blowback against the West, I fear, will be brutal for generations to come. Please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts, your comments. Do keep the show on the road at patreon.com/Al Jazeera. This is the podcast. I'll speak to you soon.